Ah, candy corn, a Halloween classic, along with those little pumpkins that seem to be made of the same stuff. These ones are made of plastic though, so not even the least bit edible. However, they will make some very fun spiders. But first, I'll make a fairly normal beaded spider with this swirly green bead that reminds me more of Nightmare Before Christmas than candy, but that's fine. The wire I used is floral wire, because it's stiffer than the craft and jewelry wire that I have. I made a loop in the middle of a piece of wire, which was wrapped around twice with both ends sticking off the same side, and that went into the swirly bead from the back. I did an abysmal job of filming the next bit, so I made a little diagram to show what I failed to show on camera. I found the center point on 2 pieces of wire, held one in the jaws of my looping pliers, and wrapped the other around the outside of the pliers. Then I twisted the 2 wires together as close as I could to where the inside wire was being held. This made a loop with 4 wires branching off of it. I was hoping to minimize the bulk of the wires that made up the legs so that the beads could be as close together as possible. It's definitely not the easiest way to go about making a beaded spider. 4 wires with a loop in the middle of each one would be much easier. I wanted a control spider of sorts before I started experimenting with more unusual ones throughout the month. Although, clearly I already made a couple others before this one. Just, ignore them for now. From a difficulty standpoint, this one is the easiest, and therefore I'm calling it the first. With 2 of the 4-leg loops made, I slid them on next to the swirly bead, added a plain green bead, and then bent the 2 body core wires out to hold everything snugly in place. Then I cut those a bit shorter and curled them into little spirals. These will be part of the face later, and I didn't see very many beaded spiders with faces when I looked them up on Pinterest, so there's that. Next came adding seed beads and bugle beads to the legs, which will mostly speed through. Although I will take just a moment to note, if you're using the stiffer floral wire, there is a risk of cracking the bugle beads when you bend it. You can avoid this if you're careful, and leave a little extra space on the wire to allow for the bends. But if you finish off the ends snug against the beads with the wire straight, and then try to bend it, it will crack the bugle beads. I would imagine thinner, more flexible wire would be less likely to cause this problem, but it would also be less likely to support the weight of the spider. Personally, I thought a sturdier spider was worth the risk of breaking beads. Last step, gluing on some eyes. These are just tiny plastic cabochons, or flat-back pearls. I'm sticking them on using tweezers and superglue. At some point off camera, I also adjusted those wire spirals to look more spider-facey. And with that, the first spider is finished. The pumpkin and gumdrop on this little guy are not beads, so they don't have a hole to run a wire through, though I did drill partway into the bottom of the pumpkin. To attach everything together, I made the legs into a standalone structure with places to glue on the fake candy. The components for this are a dressmaker pin, the same floral wire that was used on the first spider, and a bead cap with 10 holes around the edge. After folding a length of wire in half, the ends are poked through 2 of the holes in the bead cap with 1 hole left open in between, and then straightened. This hole is reserved for the pin to go through later. The next wire is folded and pushed through the next pair of holes, so that when it's straightened, it runs through the bead cap parallel to the first wire. The process is repeated, leaving the hole directly across from the reserved hole open, and poking wires through the remaining holes, until there are 4 parallel wires running through the bead cap with an open hole at each end. I used some colored jewelry wire to add the little spirals for the spider's face to the pin before adding the pin to the leg structure. To do this, I folded a small length of the jewelry wire in half, then twisted half of that tightly together, added the pin to the middle, and then twisted the other half tightly together. The twisted wires were trimmed, capped with beads, and curled into little spirals with the beady ends in the middle. Then I slightly bent the pointy end of the pin, just enough to go from one hole to the other in the leg structure. It needs to be slightly bent to get over the floral wires. With just enough of the pin sticking out on the other side to grip with pliers, I pulled the rest of the pin through. Forcing the straight part of the pin through this space squeezes all of the components together tightly and does a really nice job of holding all the pieces in place. After trimming off the pointy end of the pin, I checked the fit of the fake candy pieces and determined where I needed to bend the pin upward for it to fit into the hole in the bottom of the pumpkin. Like I mentioned earlier, I only drilled this hole part way through. I didn't want the top of the pumpkin to have a hole in it. I used hot glue to stick the pieces together, and it immediately and repeatedly failed to actually stick, despite the fact that I scuffed up the bottom of the gumdrop. This may be because it's a low-temp glue gun, and it just wasn't getting melted enough to be sticky. Normally, I would have opted for a 2-part epoxy, but that seemed like it would be difficult to use while filming and making one spider at a time. I will most likely replace this mostly useless hot glue with epoxy or perhaps a gel superglue later, but I was in the middle of recording, so I just pressed on with what I had until I got it to stay well enough to start in on the legs. The legs on the pumpkin spiders were pretty much the same as on the spiral spider, alternating seed beads and bugle beads, only this time I alternated the colors as well. The hot glue failed me once again on the last leg of the journey, and while I had the glue gun in hand, I stuck the last pumpkin spider together. Then I got some slightly better footage of how I finished off the ends of the wire by folding it over and pinching the hooked end into a little lump, as well as how I was bending the wire without breaking bugle beads. I positioned the bends around the seed beads and used my thumbnail to help direct the bending force on either side of the seed bead, and of course left some empty space on the wire so the beads could shift to accommodate the bend. Quick note on tools. I used smooth pliers for most of the work, but found there was a lot of slippage and twisting when I tried to pinch the hook into a little lump. So I grabbed some pliers with some teeth in their jaws just for that task. Here we go one more time with the leg bending. Close up this time. It's considerably less interesting than, say, fire bending or water bending, but we can't all have elemental superpowers. After yet another hot glue redo, it's time to give this little pumpkin spider some eyes. The rough fake sugar texture is a little tricky to glue to, but it's totally worth the trouble, because the eyes show up great against the orange gumdrop and really give this little guy some personality. With the pumpkin posse completed, we're on to the last spider for this video. This is the only one that I looked up a reference picture for, because I wasn't sure how to work with the candy corn shape. This one has the most challenging leg attachment because I wanted to make them look like they were coming out from the sides of the iridescent bead. It uses almost the same materials as the previous spiders, only we're swapping the bead cap out for a piece of jewelry wire. The first piece of floral wire was bent into a wavy little M in the middle, or a W, depending on which way you hold it. Then a T-pin went into the bead. This is not part of the spider, it's just temporary. And the jewelry wire was folded in half and looped over the T-pin. The floral wire was sandwiched between the jewelry wire and the bead, with the top of the W towards the point of the T-pin. And the jewelry wire was looped around the floral wire, one end over the right side and the other end over the left, then pulled tight. The process is repeated for the second floral wire, only the curves on the W shape are a little gentler, and the second floral wire is looped in place right under the first. The arrangement of the wires wasn't as clear in the video as I'd hoped it would be, so I made another diagram. Other than some minor changes in how the floral wire was bent, just a slight curve for the third and an M shape for the fourth, the remaining wires were pretty much the same as the first two. The wavy shapes in the floral wires are mostly to keep them centered on the bead, but also to make the legs go in the right direction. Once the leg wires were all in place, I removed the bead and T-pin to make it easier to tighten everything up. Then, when I put the wires back on the bead, I did so on the plain black side. The only reason I had them on the blue side in the first place was because I thought it would be easier to see the floral wires on camera that way. Then I removed the T-pin from the bead and slid the ends of the jewelry wire through instead, making sure they also went through the wire loop on the other side. With that, the legs were attached to the underside of the bead. I added some twisted wire and beads to a dressmaker pin, same as on the pumpkin spiders, for the spirally face thingies. And then decided that the legs were a little loose. So I undid the wires that went through the bead, gave the jewelry wire loop a 180 twist, and used the T-pin to catch both the part above the twist and the part below it, so that the jewelry wire wraps around the T-pin twice. That shortened the loop so that the legs were snug against the bead, and I once again removed the T-pin and threaded the ends of the jewelry wire through instead. Then I added the dressmaker pin, which is thinner than the T-pin and can fit along with the jewelry wire. With the legs secured, for good this time, I trimmed the pin to fit the partially drilled hole in the candy corn, curled the face thingies, and plunged ahead with putting the beads on the legs. Only to realize that I needed to secure the loose wire ends first, which I did by wrapping them around the loop side of the wire a couple of times, and then bending the extra wire back and forth until it broke off. The final spider for this video is nearly finished. All that remains to be done has already been covered, so instead of going over it again, I'll briefly talk about some of the upcoming candy spider videos. Next, I'm planning some bubblegum spiders, which will use the not-so-sticky hot glue from earlier as a design element. Despite the trouble it gave me on the pumpkin spiders, I'm hopeful that it will work out well on the gum spiders. After that, I plan on making a giant jawbreaker spider with Twizzler legs. For now, though, here's a final look at the candy corn and pumpkin spiders, with one random swirl thrown in.